All right, here we are, part 2. I've been told that when I hold it like this, it's unviewable where you can see the whole page. So here I am turning it the other way, which people seem to prefer. Okay, so the equipment list is pretty long. And this made starting building a character tedious, especially with new players. And part of the reason it's so long is that there are so many different pole arms. Way too many. I don't know why there's so many different pole arms. Gary Gygax once said that these pole arms were meant to be wielded by goblins and orcs and things like that, not by player characters. To me, it seems like the only pole arms you really need are spear and lance and pike, because those have a well-known history. And then there's a few others that are handy. Halberd does more damage than any of the other pole arms, 1 to 10. And Ranseur and Septum allow you to disarm opponents, so that's a handy thing. And Ranseurs and lances allow you to unhorse opponents. One thing that's different about Advanced is there's not just one melee damage for weapons. There's a damage for man-sized or smaller, and a separate column for larger than man-sized. Now the armor types are: no armor is armor class 10, leather armor is armor class 8, chainmail is armor class 5, plate mail is armor class 3, and plate mail plus shield is armor class 2. Very similar to Holmes Basic. Now, the weapons, there was this armor class adjustment thing, that weapons had bonuses or penalties against particular kinds of armor. And if you use that, it makes a huge difference about which weapon you use, but hardly anybody ever did. Certainly not with this table. There was a device that would allow you to do it more quickly and easily, but hardly anybody used it. The crossbow in particular, the heavy crossbow, has a really good bonuses for it against certain armor classes. One thing that's different from modern versions is some missile weapons did more than one attack per round. Bows had a tendency to do 2 attacks per round. Crossbows did an attack every other round, and darts did 3 attacks per round. They didn't do much damage, they didn't have much range, but it was a handy thing for your magic user to use. Alright, now you see here, it has a whole thing about hirelings, different hirelings you can have, like bearers and link boys and men-at-arms. It's right there in the player's handbook. It's the intention of the game that when you're starting out, you hire men-at-arms to beef up your numbers before going into the dungeon. And then when you get a little bit higher level, around 3rd level, you start hiring henchmen. And the henchmen are often lower level than your character. Your charisma limits how many henchmen you can have, but the henchmen are a fallback. They're your next character. All right, so the spells, there were 12 first level cleric spells and 10 7th level spells. There were 7 levels of cleric spells. And the druids also had 7 levels, but they had a different list completely. There was some overlap. Cure Light Wounds was a 1st level cleric spell and a 2nd level druid spell. Heat Metal, though, was for druids only. Many of those druid spells were for druids only. They had things to do with nature, with plants and animals and fire and weather. The magic users had the best spell list. They had 9 different levels of spells with 30 spells at 1st level and 12 of them at 9th level. So they had a lot of good spells. The illusionists, though, were a variant of magic user that had their own list of spells. They only had 7 levels of spells, but they had some spells that other classes didn't have, like some of the spells there is overlap. Phantasmal Force is a first level illusionist spell and a third level magic user spell. But illusionists also had improved Phantasmal Force and Spectral Force and improved invisibility. These are all spells for illusionists only. But they only had 5 7th level spells. But, click through here a bit. So get to but when you're a high-level illusionist and can do 7th level spells, you can, instead of casting a 7th level spell, you can memorize 4 first level magic user spells from this list. It's all the most useful spells there. Now the next few pages go into some detail about how to play the game, but it only includes information that the player needs. It doesn't include information the DM needs, like how do you know if you hit. Now in the back there's some appendices, and the first one is on psionics. Now the chances of you having psionics are really small, like 1%, 2%, really small, so your odds are against rolling this. But some players seem to constantly roll this. I suspect there's some cheating involved. I remember one player in particular who ran a illusionist with psionics multiple times, different characters, and it was kind of overpowered. It was a good thing for monsters to have, but it wasn't so good for players to have. And if the DM had been really fair about this, if you made your roll for psionics and you went in at first level, you would likely become lunch for one of the psionic monsters, because the monsters were much more powerful than a first level with psionics. But the dragon did have a cool article about how to turn it into a class. And some of those ideas were carried over into 2nd edition, some were not. So there was another thing in the back here, the Bard class. This is the very first prestige class. You would start off as a fighter, and then sometime after reaching 5th level, you would become a thief, and then sometimes after reaching 6th level, you would become a bard. And you would keep gaining hit dice, so you'd have a lot of hit points, because you had 5th level fighters hit points, plus a few thief levels, plus all these bard hit points. You could do druid spells, up to 5th level spells. I hardly ever saw one of these, but they're really powerful if somebody went to the effort to run one. And we have this 9-point alignment thing. And in the back, we have this thing on the planes, which I thought was really cool. So I was really enthused about the planes in the 1st edition era, but the planescape, playing that in Sigil in 2nd edition with the particular DM I had, cured me of my interest in the planes. Okay, so my book has seen better days. And in the back, there were these sheets which I tore out so that I could have one player have one sheet while the other player was using the book, because buying your equipment was a big part of playing, and it took a long time, especially for new players, especially with all those different pole arms. I'm not the one who highlighted things. That was somebody else. And it's also somebody else who tore out the page. I don't know when that happened or why, but anyway. Now, so there's a page of equipment, and there was a page of spells, all the spells in the back. Now, Wizards of the Coast reprinted this in a deluxe edition that had gold on the side and a thing, a ribbon, and it was a really high quality production that I saw somebody else's. I got it as a gift for somebody, and I really liked it, and I wished I'd bought it for myself when it was available, but they stopped selling it. But now Drive Through RPM has it on print on demand, so you can get it. But the quality, this book, Gary Gygax made this a book for the ages. It's still sturdy. Later, after he lost control of the company, they made some cheap editions that fall apart. And they have a different cover, but this version I got from Drive Through, I had to repair, see, because it split with just a little bit of use. So, but it's exactly every page the same as my version, or you can get this information in Osric. Osric has a player's guide that only has the information the player needs. I will review this at a later date, but it's the same information. Also, very similar, Labyrinth Lord, Advanced Labyrinth Lord is basically first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, I hope you've enjoyed this.